Laumises, The Psychology of Generation X, born roughly 1965 to 1980. Here's a psychological truth nobody says out loud. Generation X learned to survive emotionally before they learned to ask for help. They didn't grow up soft, they grew up alone. And that rewired their brains in ways most people still don't understand. If you understand the psychology of Gen X, you understand resilience, discipline, emotional self-control, and the hidden cost of independence. And that could change how you lead, work, parent, and even understand yourself. Psychology shows something powerful. Our personalities are shaped most strongly during adolescence and early adulthood. Researchers call it the impressionable years effect. Whatever economic chaos, cultural shifts, and technology revolutions you experience between roughly 15 and 25, that becomes your psychological foundation. For Generation X, those years were different, very different, and that difference explains everything. Generation X grew up between 1965 and 1980. They were called the latchkey generation. Both parents working, divorce rates rising, kids coming home to empty houses, no supervision, no constant validation, no smartphones, just keys, and responsibility. Now here's what psychology tells us. When children experience early autonomy, they develop high self-reliance, but they also develop emotional self-containment. Translation: they handle things alone, even when they shouldn't. That independence becomes their superpower and their blind spot. Why does this matter in today's world of hyperconnection and constant communication? Because Gen X built emotional muscles in silence, and silence changes how your brain wires stress. Generation X is the only generation that had a fully analog childhood and a fully digital adulthood. They remember life before the internet, and they adapted when it arrived. Psychologically, that builds cognitive flexibility. Research on adaptability and midlife cognitive resilience shows that navigating multiple technological shifts strengthens problem-solving under uncertainty. Gen X didn't grow up with Google. They grew up figuring it out. That creates a bias toward action over complaining. But here's the twist. When you're used to figuring it out alone, you often don't delegate well. You carry too much. Sound familiar? Gen X came of age during economic instability, corporate downsizing, and public scandals, Watergate aftermath, Cold War tension, recessions. Institutional trust dropped sharply during their formative years. Psychology shows that when trust in institutions declines during adolescence, long-term skepticism increases. So Gen X developed a core belief: don't depend on the system. This is why they value financial independence, skill competence, practical knowledge backup plans. They don't romanticize security, they engineer it. But skepticism also makes vulnerability harder, and that affects relationships. Recent mental health research comparing generational cohorts shows something interesting. While younger generations report higher anxiety and depressive symptoms in recent years, Gen X reports high stress, but often lower reported emotional disclosure. That means they feel pressure, but they don't broadcast it. Psychologically, this is emotional suppression mixed with resilience. They were taught, handle it, and they did. But here's the psychological trade-off. Unprocessed stress doesn't disappear. It relocates into the body, into irritability, into burnout. Why are so many Gen X leaders exhausted right now? Because they are often the sandwich generation, caring for aging parents, supporting children, holding leadership roles. They carry the middle. Quietly, Gen X values autonomy at work more than praise. They don't need constant feedback. they need competence. Self-determination theory in psychology tells us humans need three things: autonomy, competence, relatedness. Gen X prioritizes autonomy and competence first. Give them space, give them responsibility, then get out of the way. They don't want micromanagement, they want trust. This is why many Gen X managers struggle with overly dependent teams. They think, why can't you just figure it out? Because they had to. Generation X communicates differently, less dramatic, less performative, more dry humor. Sarcasm became emotional armor. Humor became regulation. Psychologically, humor is a mature defense mechanism. It reduces anxiety without denying reality. That's classic Gen X. But emotional minimalism can create misunderstandings with younger generations who are more expressive. It's not that Gen X doesn't care. It's that they don't advertise caring. Big difference. Now let's talk performance. Why are so many Gen X individuals highly productive? Because they developed internal discipline, not external validation. They weren't rewarded with constant likes. They weren't motivated by visibility. They were motivated by necessity. And necessity builds grit. Angela Duckworth's research on grit shows sustained effort over time predicts long-term success more than raw talent. Gen X practiced sustained effort before it became a hashtag. But here's the warning. High grit without emotional recalibration leads to silent burnout. And many don't notice until their body forces them to. If you're Gen Z or Millennial watching this, listen carefully. From Gen X, you can learn how to be self-sufficient, how to tolerate discomfort, how to work without applause, how to adapt when the world changes. But you should not copy one thing blindly: emotional isolation. Strength is not silence. Resilience is not repression. The next evolution of psychological maturity is combining independence with emotional literacy. If you're Gen X watching this, you don't have to carry everything alone anymore. You built the muscle. You proved yourself. Now the upgrade is connection without losing independence. Psychological growth in midlife is about integration, keeping strength, adding softness, maintaining competence, allowing support. That's not weakness, that's evolution. Here's the core psychological truth behind Generation X. They were raised in independence, so they became adaptable, resilient, and competent. But the same independence that built their strength can limit their emotional expansion. The very trait that protected them can also isolate them. That's the paradox, and every generation has one. So here's my challenge to you. If you're Gen X, stop pretending you don't need anyone. Strength grows when shared. If you're younger, stop confusing resilience with coldness. Some people survived things you never had to. Understand before you judge. Study before you criticize. And most importantly, upgrade yourself with what each generation did right. Because psychology isn't about labels, it's about patterns. And patterns can be improved. If this video gave you clarity, subscribe. We don't do surface-level psychology here. We break patterns. We build discipline. We build awareness. Share this with someone from Generation X. And tell me in the comments, is Gen X the most resilient generation or just the most emotionally guarded? Let's have the real conversation. I'll see you in the next one.